All right, time for our weekly outlook. Well, we continue trading within this 3 week balance, right? We've sort of just continued to establish more value where it's been previously. Really from this like gap up, um, and then we spent a week sort of drifting up. We still established like the bulk of value sort of in the middle. That's where we've sort of consolidated, or most of last week was spent trading, right? Time and volume wise. Um, Same on NQ. It's been relatively strong, so it's a little higher, right, relative to ES. Um, Now we're not. I know ES closed the week with an inside week, barely, excluding ETH. We got a crazy pop Wednesday night. NQ, not necessarily an inside week, right? Kind of wicked the high, opened, and traded straight down. Um, so I'm going to continue working with the idea of sideways until otherwise, right? And by sideways, I just mean rotational, just selling into the upper end, buying into the lower end. I know it's a lot easier said than done. There are a couple ways to go about this, right? So I'll illustrate this on NQ because it's a little easier visually when working with the current profile. So we'll merge all these together, right? So we have where I call the bulk of value. And you can see that the shelves there, 30, 21, 350, and 470, that sort of marks off the outer ends of like where the most volume and time is being spent. We can arguably say that it's sort of like 470 down to this like 220s, 230s where we're trading now. This like 530s maybe even, right? You can sort of call it that. So we're gonna be working with this to try to see. Well, we can try to take it up into the extreme here, right? And then more so if we start failing this and start offering up into this and just start to see some sellers up into this again, then I'm sort of expecting us to trade back towards the lower end of the balance, right? The extremes. We didn't quite see the 060s on Friday. We came real close. And then this like probably more important one down at a 900, right, which sort of expect next before EC balance lows, right? And same goes for the upside, right? If we can, let's say, from where we're currently trading, let's say if we can hold these 230s, trade back up to 350s, acceptance back over 350s takes you up to the upper end, right? 500s, maybe even a little overextension up to 630s. From where we're currently at, don't really want to call for the next 100 like the next 1,000 point move on NQ. It's really tough to do that, like just based off of this. Quite a bit of news this week, so likely gets us moving, hopefully. Anyway, let's go over ES. All right, bulk of value being traded here, 59.05 up to 59.36. If we just want to see, yeah, inside week, so we also have that in play, right? Inside week low, inside week high. If we get a break of that, obviously I'm not going to be one to try to fade it unless let's say we break to the downside, right? And if sellers fail a break, right? Let's say where they break, and let's get a bid off of somewhere, or whether it's a random level, right? If they lose it and can trade back into last week's range, I am heavy long, shooting for the upper end, right? Simple as that. Same applies for the upside. Buyers, let's say, right, midweek or something, let's say we get up here. We cannot get a breakout in continuation, and this fades lower, it becomes an issue. And I'm not really, yes, we have this level, but failed breakouts lead to very, very quick and swift downside moves. Failed breakdowns lead to very, very quick and swift upside moves. So, obviously, if it breaks down, am I hoping for that? Sure, but it doesn't mean I'm like bid at every one of these, like hoping for it, right? I need to wait till we get back over and see something change there before I get myself involved. So this is like one big play I'm looking for this week. Other than that, like if we're breaking below and it keeps going, I have no reason to be trying longs with any kind of size. I'll still probably do it anyway because I'm a bull. But it won't be of any kind of size. Shouldn't hurt too much unless you're like doing them at every level. It does get a little annoying sometimes. Just pick your spots. Maybe add on if we get some more confirmation, that kind of thing. But if we're getting a breakdown of this and staying below last week's lows, it's sort of with the relative weakness in ES, I'd sort of expect to see the gap fill or maybe come down and trade some of these levels we haven't seen in a while. All right. We'll have to see where Monday opens up or today opens up, but back over here, the 59.59 area, just gonna be long again, right? Targeting at least the upper end and probably runners into the upper the highs here, right? Same goes to NQ. I know their profile looks a little different. I'm currently long 230s. Average is what? Yeah, 238. Risking 215. Right? Relatively light in these. I really don't like to trade Sundays. Same with NQ. If we're gonna be breaking away from this value, right? I'm really not interested in playing. Well, I always say the idea, right, given a balance, is to short into the upper end and long into the lower end, right? Obviously, it's not cookie cutter like this. You always get some overextension sometimes, right? But the idea would be to be long into the lower end. In this instance, I'm not too bullish about being bid here. Maybe here. I like this better than this. Saying that because this level got tested Friday. Over here, over here. Is it a strong level? Probably. Yeah, I think so. But it's getting weaker and weaker. Same goes to this 220s, 230s level, right? Getting weaker and weaker. So the longer we stay in this balance, the greater likelihood that one of these moves to the extremes then breaks out and goes. So since we've been in this for 3 weeks, I'm like really right. Like we've been bid at the extremes, right? With a decent bit of confidence. I'm not gonna be like that this week, just because of how many times we sort of tested each side and failed back to value, right? So each time we like trade away from this, it's been a failure back to value, meaning the breakdown here. And obviously you didn't break out of the, I guess that you didn't break down through this little gap up we had 3 Mondays ago, but all of it's just failed back into value, which is this, right? And the ETH push that we had up into 800s failed up into 800 and came crashing back down, right? Back into value. And once you traded back into value, what'd you see? The opposite end of value. All right, you got a failed breakdown here, and guess what? You trade back to value Friday, right? Last Friday. So, could it happen a couple more times? Sure. But eventually, it's been 3 weeks, so I'm thinking that time is about to be very soon, especially with all the headlines we're going to see this week, probably. Hard data as well as soft data, right? And obviously the war in Ukraine is escalating a little bit. So I'm going to be cautious into the extremes. Maybe if it's breaking up here, I might be a little aggressive, just because I am a bull and I love playing the upside. So I'm going to be cautious into the downside, right? Doesn't hurt me when I'm playing something like this with like 2, 3 lots, 4 lots. I'm trying to size like 8, 10, 12, 15, 20. I can't be doing that down here, right? If let's say we get a bid randomly off of, wherever it may be, here, 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 and it trades back into 230s, yeah, then I'm confident, right? Same thing with that, like ES inside week look blow and fail, right? If we trade away from value, fail, and trade back into it, then I can press size to take it back up to the opposite end of value, right? Or said range. And ES's case, it's an inside week. and the bulk of value, right? This is sort of where the bulk of value is being traded. So this is what we'll be watching again. So levels don't change for the most part. And yes, we have most of these levels based off of the composite profile, but you can always go into, let's say, like last week's profile, right? Let's split this here. Say, okay, is there anything here that we can watch to sort of help us or guide you through the auction within this 3-week balance? It looks pretty much the same, right? Albeit you can maybe throw a level up here at like 59.15-ish. Or maybe look at simply Friday's range, right? Or Friday's profile and say, okay, you got half back here. You got this low volume in between, arguably 2 distributions, maybe even 3 if you're looking at the volume profile, but in TPO you're looking at 2, essentially 2, right? You got 1 here, 1 down here. So we can also look at this for maybe an area to execute, or just an area to gauge strength, right? So I have a couple of these levels that don't go all the way to the right. That's sort of like the lesser important levels that I'm watching. There could be a ton more, but I don't want to clutter my chart with so many. Same goes with NQ, right? These are like the less significant levels I'm watching. There weren't many from like Friday's session I was looking at, because they overlaps for the most part with like the bigger time frame ones. Although you do have a spike base here, which I failed to mark off. Also a value area high. You got end of day spike, so we'll watch that. Although it's not even trading close to it, right at 400. So you can also watch that as well. Okay. We put on some swing longs on crude that did well at the over. We actually gapped up. I'm just gonna say this is like sort of an example as to sort of demonstrate auction market theory. We already got in this trade and took it, right? Where's the message? Right, CL swing long 60.15, risking about 60 points, 60 ticks. And we were targeting 61.80 and 260. So we got a decent bit. Already skilled out most. I've only got 2 on now, but the idea here is like, okay, this is your composite of this like big balance we've sort of been trading in, right? You approach, arguably most of your values being built here. So what am I doing? Selling into highs and buying into lows, right? Obviously got the bulk of value like here. So we had traded down into, sort of these lows, this lower end here. We had some really nice excess, right? You also have some weak lows here that we finally took out again and traded back into it. So since the move off the lows looked pretty decent, I was like, okay, let's just swing long. We came into the shelf exactly, which I should have been watching, but we reacted a little bit late to it. We got in at 60.15. Swung long, not a heavy position. I'm scared to swing heavy positions in crude over the weekend, especially over the weekend. The 1 hour maintenance, I really don't mind. But over the weekend, crude can be a little scary, right? Like, let's say if you were short into this, which you probably shouldn't have been. And you could argue that you had like the bulk of value pressing into it, but when you get failed breakdowns, leads to pretty swift moves back up. So hit our first target, hit it like the shelf here at like 2.6, 62.6, and naked point of control. So we got out of most of them, now just holding 2, right? So for potentially like these highs here, maybe, or test of this wick. So we'll see what happens to that, but that's just more so an example. I don't really have a play from here. Like if you want to get involved, like you need to see 62 hold, right? Or if it fails again, then you take it back down to lows, right? Or let's say you get some excess past this high and fail into, I don't know, something up here, right? If we can trade back below, let's say that level looks good for a trade, at least back down to here, most likely back down a lot lower. Bigger picture, a bigger time frame, I am a little bullish on crude, just based off like the macro. a little bit. I'm not really. I don't want to be a macro trader. I'm not a huge macro trader, but that's just sort of one of the takes I have is long energy, long copper, stay risk on, short bonds. So we'll stick with that. It's playing out for now. We've had that sort of planned out for a while now. So we'll stick with that until something tells us otherwise, right? We got quite a bit of hard data this week, so it should be interesting to see what happens. I know gold's getting a bit of a bid here, crazy bid actually. I really don't trade gold. I don't want to touch it really. I sometimes trade it, but copper, not long futures this time, unfortunately. But I am long FCX, so we'll see how that does this week and whatnot. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Currently the long's playing out a little. I am relatively light compared to, I really don't like to trade Sundays. So relatively light in this current long. Yes, I'm not in anything yet. Yeah, we'll go from there. So hopefully you'll have a great trading week.